we're moving now to our next speaker, and our next speaker is Ms. Jenny Chen. If you would have attended the first session of the Legal Education Conference, Professor Gallagher referred to Professor Michael Lower as CUHK's legal education guru, and I think that we can say that Ms. Jenny Chen is our second legal education guru. I met her after she had just finished working on a book with Professor Dean Wolf, Flipped Classrooms for Legal Education. And she is in fact currently in the middle of writing a PhD on legal education as well. And that PhD is called Outcome-Based Education, Teaching Practices in Legal Education in Hong Kong, a Mixed Method Study. And that PhD is supervised by Professors Wolf and Marsh. Today, Jenny is also going to talk to us about legal education and especially outcomes-based education. And she will present on, do law teachers in Hong Kong have awareness of outcomes-based education? Jenny, over to you.
Can everyone see my...
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Oh, thank you, Esther, for your introduction. Yes, the topic of my presentation today is do law teachers in Hong Kong have awareness of outcome-based education, OBE? Well, like you, Esther mentioned earlier, is part of my ongoing PhD thesis. The thesis aims to study the status of OBE implementation in legal education in Hong Kong. Part of this thesis conducted an empirical study involving law teachers in Hong Kong. Well, in fact, some of the law teachers who present in this conference have kindly offered their help in my empirical study. My presentation today will focus on this empirical study. So here is the outline of my presentation. I would first explain the definition adopted for this paper, the definition of OBE adopted for this paper, and the hypothesis of my research. This is followed by the design of the empirical instruments conducted for my thesis. I will share with you the key findings and the recommendations for future research. Because of the time constraints, I cannot go into detail about the limitations and assumptions of the research, but you can ask me later. So first thing first, OBE has many definitions. The definition I adopted for this thesis is one developed by William Spady. OBE means clearly focusing and organizing everything in an educational system around what is essential for all students to be able to do successfully at the end of their learning experiences. The reason for choosing Spady's definition is because it is considered the most authoritative figure in the field of OBE. This thesis argues that awareness of OBE is crucial to determine if a teacher is teaching in line with OBE. So by awareness, it means that teachers understand that their pedagogical decision-making should be driven by outcomes. This seems very obvious as OBE is an outcomes-driven educational model. This thesis argues that awareness of OBE is crucial because when OBE experts have recommended teaching practices for OBE, identifying OBE compliant teaching based on the use of these practices is a problematic task. A majority of OBE teaching practices are not exclusive to OBE and are found in other educational theories. As a result, the use of these practices may be driven by reasons other than outcomes, for example, personal preference or experience. In fact, this thesis posits that most law teachers have little or no awareness of OBE even though some of them may report that they are teaching in line with OBE. This research relied on two predominant empirical methods, quantitative and qualitative methods, and are conducted in two consecutive phases. The questions of the online survey and semi-structured interviews were guided by literature in OBE. I can only go through some of the key questions with you because of the time constraint. There are a total of 9 questions in the online survey. I will share with you 2 that are relevant to OBE awareness. One of the questions asked law teachers to rate their familiarity with OBE and other educational concepts, including the options on the screen. The main reason for including educational concepts other than OBE was to cloud the fact that this empirical research is about OBE. So the expected outcome of this question was that respondents would answer familiar with most of these educational concepts, including OBE. This is only natural to assume that most law teachers do want to give the impression that they are competent teachers and therefore familiar with most of these educational concepts. This question was therefore meant to prove that most law teachers claim that they are aware of OBE. 33 respondents answered this question. 29 of them reported that they are quite familiar or very familiar with OBE to a varying extent. The number of respondents who indicated quite familiar or very familiar with other educational concepts is as shown on the screen. The results of this question match the expected outcome that most teachers would report that they are familiar with most of the educational concepts. Another question in the online survey asked teachers to rate the importance of factors that affect their decisions in selecting subject topics. Factors highlighted in red are OBE-oriented factors. OBE-conscious teachers should therefore be aware of them. The hypothesis is that if teachers had an awareness of OBE, they would rate these items more important than other factors. The expected outcome of this question was that respondents would rate important for most of these items without differentiating OBE-oriented factors or non-OBE factors. This question collected 32 responses. The number of respondents indicating a factor important or very important is as shown on the screen. You can see that most respondents rated both OBE-oriented factors and non-OBE factors similarly important. The results also match the expected outcomes. The respondents of the online survey were later invited to participate in the semi-structured interview. In the semi-structured interview, one question asked teachers to rate the importance of factors when formulating course outcomes. Interviewees can multi-select these items and can add additional comments. 10 teachers participated in the interview. 8 reported that they take into account more than one factor. The number of responses in relation to each factor is as shown on the screen. However, no interviewees mentioned additional factors such as program outcomes, faculty mission, or university mission. The group of OBE-oriented factors mentioned in the online survey as being relevant for their course outcomes. But also in the interview, another question asked if interviewees would describe their teaching as OBE. 5 of them responded that they describe their teaching as OBE to a varying extent. Among them, 2 of them said Yes, but explain that they teach in accordance with OBE, not by choice. OBE is imposed on them by the schools. In particular, one teacher commented that I have to describe my teaching as OBE as a requirement from the school. To be honest, because we are simply checking the boxes, teachers can make necessary adjustments in their classroom. Another teacher said, yes, in a formal way. I think as a formality rather than something that I consciously think about. Based on the findings of the online survey and semi-structured interview, this paper concluded that, well, first, teachers' self-report awareness of OBE may be unreliable. While a high percent of respondents self-report that they are familiar with OBE, they place equal importance on the OBE factors and non-OBE factors when making teaching decisions. Second, law teachers may not have sufficient awareness of OBE. When no suggestions are provided to interviewees, they fail to mention OBE-oriented factors for making decisions related to course outcomes. This finding suggests that law teachers may not have an adequate awareness of OBE. The sample size of this research is too small to generalize reliable results. However, the findings are indicative and telling. Law teachers' OBE awareness is a neglected area and deserves more attention. Research with a larger sample size would further enrich our knowledge of OBE. This study provides a blueprint for future research. Future research will have to consider the following points to explore the implementation of OBE in legal education. For this reason, this study suggests that because this study relies highly on the self-report of law teachers, and extension of this research in-class observations should be conducted to verify actual teaching practices. This study focused on law teachers. The views of school managements, regulatory body, and students was outside the scope of this study. Future research should therefore be conducted to explore their views. And also an in-depth study should be conducted to identify course and subject-specific variations regarding OBE implementation. An in-depth study should be conducted to determine the link, if any, between OBE awareness and teaching effectiveness. This is important because this kind of research would confirm the importance of teachers' awareness in OBE.
I think we've heard before where we have all these great pedagogical ideas that we're asked to work with today, and not many people are actually trained in them. I do have some questions. Again, if anyone has a question, please type them in. First of all, I think a very important question from Ahmed Mohammed Mikhail is OBE synonymous to learning outcomes? And I suppose the follow-up question on that would be, if not, what exactly is the difference? Can you explain that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is OBE synonymous to learning outcomes? So is OBE the same as learning outcomes?
I think they are the same thing. As OBE is the educational concept to achieve learning outcomes. So of course, the different schools have different definition of OBE and definitely different goals for OBE, and well, that really depends on the school. Yeah.
Thank you. And from the same participant, I have a question. Is it a good practice for a law teacher to test the knowledge of the students by asking them to design OBE for topics they have learned in previous classes?
Well, this is a tough question. well, I don't have a definite answer for that. But perhaps, yes, I think, well, one could try, but especially, well, one important step in OBE, I would say, is the formulation of program outcomes, because that's the starting point of every other steps. But so in order to produce a perfect, I shouldn't say perfect, a more advanced program outcomes, one way to do is to get the help from stakeholders in legal education or in the legal professions. Well, law schools should definitely, it would be informative if law schools could conduct survey with legal professions and definitely with alumni, because they are the ones who know what's going on in the job market. Yeah.
Thank you. I have also a question from Jeremy Dime, who is a barrister in London. Were survey responses from junior or more experienced law teachers? Did you survey both?
Oh, well, as far as I remember, there are the youngest teachers, I think, have at least 4 years of teaching experience, and the more senior ones have up to 40 years. So I think it's a very wide range of spectrum of respondents.
That is, and did you find that the responses were different between those age categories?
Not specifically, no, not really.
I do have like a follow-up question on that, I think. So you have surveyed law teachers in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
Have you, and I realized that the response rate was a little bit low, so I don't want to, but to maintain the confidentiality of your research. But did you have the opportunity to survey across the 3 law schools?
Oh yes, I because of the time constraints, I explained the design. Yes, I managed to get responses from law teachers from all 3 schools. They're very kind and candid with the response, and yeah, I'm forever grateful for them. And yes, if I have answered that.
And I think on that, I don't have any more questions in my inbox here, so I'm just going to ask you all the ones I have. Do you think that there might have been some bias in your research where only certain teachers have responded, so those might actually be the teachers that were already more interested in legal education to begin with?
Yeah, well, that's something I mentioned in my assumptions, because but I assume that, well, the teachers who responded to my survey and interviews are the ones who are more interested in law teaching. Yeah, but through the conversations I had with them, it seems that they are very kind people who just want to help me with my to complete my PhD rather than having an agenda or something.
There are some, I know from experience, there's some really, really nice people out there in Hong Kong willing to help poor PhD students do their research. I was once one myself, one of these PhD students, and I really appreciated the positive responses that I got from some people too. So I think if there are no further questions, we can move on to the 3rd speaker, but not before thanking you very much, Jenny, for your presentation.